Most people do not destroy their finances with one giant mistake. They destroy them with spending that looks normal. That is the part people miss. They imagine financial failure must look dramatic. A failed business, a divorce, a medical catastrophe, a stock market panic, a house they obviously could not afford. Those things happen, but what interests me more are the quiet losses, the spending patterns that sound reasonable, the purchases that feel deserved, the habits that seem harmless, the stories people tell themselves to turn expensive choices into emotionally acceptable choices. That is where enormous amounts of money disappear, not in one visible collapse, in 1,000 ordinary leaks. And because the leaks feel normal, people do not challenge them. They defend them. They say, it is only a monthly payment. They say, I deserve this. They say, it is an investment in my health. They say, I need this for work. They say, it is for the points. They say, I will use it later. They say, it is self-care. They say, renting is throwing money away. They say, I am just upgrading my life. That is how wealth gets quietly starved, not because people never earned enough, but because they kept normalizing the wrong things. The source you gave me is strongest when it exposes that exact pattern. Under the list format, the deeper point is not never spend money. It is that people keep wasting extraordinary sums on purchases and habits they have mislabeled as normal, smart, necessary, or even investments, when those choices are really crowding out intentional spending and long-term wealth building. Faithfulesite Fay Turn 21 File 0 Fay. That is exactly where I would begin. Because I like spending money, I have no religion against comfort. I do not worship deprivation. If something genuinely improves your life, fits in your system, and does not weaken your future, good boy it, use it, enjoy it. But I hate spending that lies about what it is. Spending that pretends to be practical when it is emotional. Spending that claims to be an investment when it is a luxury. Spending that hides behind words like responsible, deserved, or strategic. That kind of spending is expensive twice. It costs money and it costs clarity. Clarity is one of the most valuable financial assets in the world, because once clarity is gone, almost any leak can survive. Now, let me begin with one of the most destructive habits in consumer finance, buying cars by monthly payment. The source starts there for good reason. It says dealerships want buyers thinking in monthly payment terms because that lets them stretch loans, bury add-ons, and make overpriced vehicles feel affordable. It argues that the correct move is to decide the total price you can truly afford before walking onto the lot, and to include the total cost of ownership rather than just the sticker price. Faithfulesite Fay Turn 21 File 0 Fay. That is exactly right. A monthly payment is not a price. It is a disguise. It allows a person to feel in control while surrendering the only number that matters, the total cost. That is how people walk into financial traps while feeling prudent. They say, I can handle $600 a month fine. Can you handle the total purchase price, the insurance, the gas, the maintenance, the registration, the repairs, the depreciation, and the opportunity cost of the cash that machine will consume over the next several years? That is the real question. Monthly payment thinking is one of the biggest ways people confuse survival with affordability. Now let us go to trucks, because this is a more emotional version of the same disease. The source says many people are buying trucks or SUVs. They simply cannot afford, often on moderate incomes, and then rationalizing the purchase through occasional utility or identity language. It gives examples of people spending absurd amounts on trucks they do not actually need for work. then justifying the whole thing by the monthly payment. Fay file site Fay turn 21 file 0 Fay. That is a perfect example of luxury disguised as necessity. I do not mind if a man loves a truck. I mind if he refuses to admit it is a luxury, call it what it is. If you need it and the math is clean, good. If you use it heavily and it belongs in your rich life, good. But if what you really bought was an identity, then at least be honest enough to say so. I can work with honesty. I cannot work with self-flattery disguised as arithmetic. Now let us move into one of the most revealing categories in modern spending: fitness equipment. The source talks about trendy machines and gadgets that become furniture. Things like Pelotons, Bowflex machines, Pilates reformers, weighted gear, and other expensive home solutions that get used a few times and then abandoned. Its core point is correct. Expensive gear does not create consistency. Habits do. Fay file site Fay turn 21 file 0 Fay. Exactly. People love buying the identity of discipline. They are less excited by the actual repetition of discipline. That is why expensive fitness gear sells so well. You are not just buying the machine, you are buying the story. This time I will change. This time I will become the version of me who wakes up early, trains every day, and turns life around. That is a profitable fantasy, often not a durable habit. A smarter move is almost embarrassingly simple. Walk first, train simply first. Join the gym you will actually use. Prove the habit before you buy the home monument to the habit. Now let us talk about miracle products. The source says people keep buying new supplements, skincare, shampoos, creams, and grooming products because they are always chasing the next holy grail instead of committing to something long enough to know if it works. It says this is often just procrastination disguised as optimization. Faithfully cite Fay turn 21 file 0 Fay. That is one of the most useful ideas in the entire script. Consumption often masquerades as progress. A person feels he is working on himself because he bought the next solution. He is not. He is shopping. This is true in health, beauty, productivity, organization, and finance. The better rule is simple: commit before upgrading. Use one thing long enough to evaluate it honestly. That principle will save people a shocking amount of money. Now let us go to extended warranties, because this is one of the clearest examples of fear being sold as prudence. The source says extended warranties sound responsible but are often just a profitable upsell. It points out that many products do not fail in that period anyway, and that many credit cards already extend the manufacturer warranty, meaning people may already have protection they forgot to value. Fay file site Fay turn 21 file 0 Fay. That is exactly right. A lot of people hear the word protection and stop thinking. They assume more protection must be more responsible. Sometimes it is just more profitable for the seller. The adult move is not to buy every layer of anxiety offered at the register. The adult move is to understand what you already have and to price the real risk. Now let us talk about the great leak of online life. Impulse gadget buying. The source points to random Amazon purchases, especially gadgets that feel useful or life-changing in the moment and then disappear from real life almost immediately. Faithful site Fay turn 21 file 0 Fay. This is a modern disease. Desire now has no friction. You see, you click, you pay. And because the effort is gone, the thinking often goes too. That is dangerous, which is why I think the source becomes much more powerful when it introduces the idea of money dials. It says people should identify the specific categories where spending genuinely makes life richer, then spend more there and cut hard elsewhere. Fay file site Fay turn 21 file 0 Fay. That is a beautiful framework. Because the opposite of waste is not austerity. It is intention. Once you know what truly makes your life better, Random purchases become easier to reject. Now the gadget is not just $50. It is $50 that could have gone to something you actually value. That changes behavior. Now let me turn to one of the most important honesty tests in all of personal finance. Luxuries disguised as investments. The source is aggressive here, and it should be. It points out the way people call mattresses, decks, skincare, trainers, gyms, and other expensive comforts investments, when what they really mean is that they want the item and feel uncomfortable admitting it is a luxury. It insists on a narrower definition of investment, something that can produce a financial return. Fay file site Fayturn 21, file 0 Fay. That is exactly right. A mattress may improve your life. Wonderful, a trainer may improve your life. Wonderful, a nicer deck may improve your life. Wonderful, none of that makes them investments. And the distinction matters because language shapes discipline. If you call every luxury an investment, eventually your entire spending life becomes morally self-excusing. I want adults to enjoy luxuries honestly, not launder them through fake financial vocabulary. If you want the expensive thing, and it fits in your conscious spending plan, buy it. But do not call desire an investment just because that phrase makes you feel more serious. Now let us move to fake frugality. Buying cheap now and promising to upgrade later. The source says this often leads to buying the same item 2 or 3 times because the cheap version breaks, underperforms, or never really satisfies the need. It argues that one higher quality purchase can end up costing less than multiple cheap regrets. Fay site Fayturn 21 file 0 Fay. That is exactly right. Cheap is not always cheap. Expensive is not always expensive. The better question is lifetime cost. How long will this last? How often will I use it? How much frustration will it remove? How likely am I to buy this twice? If I buy the wrong version first, this is where maturity shows up. You do not need the best of everything. That is vanity. But for the things that matter deeply, buying the right thing once can be far cheaper than performing thrift repeatedly. Now let us go to subscriptions, because they are the perfect example of money leaving life without leaving a memory. The source says subscriptions kept just in case drain checking accounts month after month, crowd out room for things that actually matter, and create that familiar sense of, where did all my money go? It recommends reading statements quarterly and cutting ruthlessly. Fay site Fayturn 21 file 0 Fay. That is exactly right. Subscriptions are dangerous because they survive in the gap between decision and attention. You decided once, the charge keeps living. And because each charge is small, you never emotionally feel the full damage. But small repeated drains are how financial fragility is built. It is not even only the money. It is the loss of intention. You are no longer deciding. The system is deciding for you. That is always dangerous. Now let us move into the hot takes section, because this is where the source is intentionally provocative and often most useful emotional spending disguised as self-care. The source says a massage, brunch, or indulgence is not self-care if you cannot afford it. It is stress spending. It recommends defining what self-care actually means to you and funding it on purpose instead of reactively. Fay file site Fayturn 21 file 0 Fay. That is exactly right. A lot of people use the language of healing to excuse the mechanics of avoidance. I had a rough week. I deserve this. Maybe, but if the thing lands on revolving debt or crowds out more important goals, what you really bought was temporary anesthesia. That is not care. That is postponement. Real self-care is easiest to enjoy when the money was already assigned. That is why conscious spending matters. It keeps pleasure from turning into drag. Now let us go to a whole category of products built on confusion, overcomplicated investments, and overcomplicated financial apps. The source attacks crypto obsession, infinite banking, EULs, financial apps with too many tabs and categories, and the broader tendency to confuse complexity with intelligence. It says simple index. Fund investing sounds boring, but that simplicity is precisely what makes it powerful, while complexity is often sold because complexity is profitable. Fayfile's site Fayturn21 file 0 Fay, that is one of the best points in the whole file. Complexity sells. Simplicity compounds. People want to feel special while investing. They want complexity to signal intelligence. Usually it signals someone else is getting paid. The source is also right about gamified investing apps. It says some are built to increase trading behavior, especially among young men, by turning investing into entertainment. Fayfile site Fayturn21 file 0 Fay, that is poison. Entertainment and investing should not be merged. One of the fastest ways to hurt long-term returns is to turn your portfolio into an excitement machine. Now let us move to aspiration shopping, which may be the most psychologically revealing category in the entire script. The source says people buy planners, desks, decks, meal systems, tubs, and premium objects, not just for the object itself, but because they are buying the fantasy of a better version of themselves. Fayfile site Fayturn21 file 0 Fay. That is absolutely right. People do not buy only products. They buy future identity. This planner will make me organized. This desk will make me focused. This deck will make me someone who watches the sunrise with coffee. This car will make me confident. This object will make me become the version of me I wish already existed. Maybe usually not. The fantasy self is one of the most profitable customer segments in the world. That is why marketing works so well. The adult response is not to reject pleasure. It is to ask a devastatingly useful question. Do I already have enough to begin becoming that person without buying this? Often the answer is yes. Now we must talk about the biggest sacred cow in American personal finance, the primary residence. The source says treating your house like an automatic investment is often misleading because people ignore interest, taxes, maintenance, fees, and opportunity cost. It argues that many buyers are really purchasing a lifestyle luxury and only later backfill the decision with investment language. Fayfile site Fayturn21 file 0 Fay. That is exactly right. A house can be a wonderful purchase. It can stabilize a life. It can fit your rich life beautifully. But that does not automatically make it a great investment. The source is right to say start with the numbers and then account honestly for the non-financial reasons. Fayfile site Fayturn21 file 0 Fay. That is how grown-ups buy houses, not with slogans. With arithmetic, now let us move to one of the most quietly destructive leaks in modern wealth building, assets under management fees. The source says a 1% advisor fee looks harmless, but can consume around 28% of total returns over a lifetime, costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. It argues that many people would be better off learning the basics themselves and paying hourly or project-based advice when necessary. Fayfile site Fayturn21 file 0 Fay. That is exactly right. Small percentages on large balances over long periods are financial termites. People bargain hunt over groceries and then donate six figures to invisible fee structures because 1% sounds small. That is irrational. Fees matter because they compound negatively. They quietly tax the future. Now let us talk about home renovations. The source says many renovations do not pay for themselves and that most should be treated as luxuries for joy, not as ROI stories. It goes so far as to call many of them emotional decisions wrapped in financial justifications. Fayfile site Fayturn21 file 0 Fay again. I want honesty. Renovate because you want to, fine. But if you keep pretending every emotional home upgrade is an investment, you weaken your own judgment. And if you finance luxuries with debt while calling them investments, you are playing a very dangerous game. Now, let us go to credit card rewards. The source says using rewards to justify overspending is absurd if you are carrying a balance, because paying extremely high interest to earn tiny point values is financially backward. It says points only matter after the balance is paid in full every month. Fay file a site, Fay turn 21, file 0 Fay. That is the adult rule, rewards are dessert, not the meal. If the balance rolls, the rewards conversation ends. Now let us deal with whole life insurance, infinite banking, and all the pseudo-elite products people buy when they want to feel financially advanced. The source says these are often complex, commission-heavy, and unnecessary for most people, and that term, life insurance, is usually the cleaner solution. If insurance is actually needed, Fay file site Fay turn 21 file 0 Fay. Exactly. Americans love to cosplay sophistication. That is expensive. Real wealth is usually much more boring than wealth theater. Now let us talk about online courses and conferences, because this is another perfect example of buying the feeling of progress instead of the reality of progress. The source says buying education is not the same as implementation, and even notes that people in credit card debt should not be buying more high-priced solutions before dealing with the underlying instability. Fay file site Fay turn 21 file 0 Fay. That is, a lot of people love buying the identity of self-improvement. They love telling themselves they are the kind of person who invests in growth fine. But if the course is never used, you did not buy progress. You bought inspiration. Inspiration is cheap to feel and expensive to fund repeatedly. Finally, let us talk about status cards and loyalty programs. The source says if you are not really using the perks, then the annual fees are often just expensive ego boosts, and the right move is to audit those benefits yearly and downgrade what no longer fits your life. Fay file a site, Fay turn 21 file 0 Fay, that is right. Status is often a fee paid to protect a story. I am not against a premium card. I am against paying to feel like the kind of person who should have one. Now let me bring this all together the way Buffett should. I do not want you to stop spending. I want you to stop lying. Stop calling luxuries investments. Stop calling stress, spending self-care. Stop calling monthly payment shopping affordability. Stop calling subscriptions harmless. Stop calling points a win while the balance rolls. Stop calling fantasy purchases necessary. Stop calling complexity intelligence. Stop calling aspiration spending planning, because every lie in your spending life becomes a leak in your wealth life. And most people do not need another lecture about cutting coffee. They need to recover honesty. Once honesty returns, waste becomes obvious. And once waste becomes obvious, something wonderful happens. You do not just save more, you spend better. You enjoy the things you truly love more, because they are no longer competing with 1,000 invisible drains. That is what a rich life is. Not zero spending. Intentional spending. You do not become rich by cutting joy. You become rich by cutting confusion. That is a far better deal. And if you learn that lesson early enough, you do not just save a few dollars here and there. You save years of financial drift. That is worth a great deal.